Hi, friends. It is Friday morning. You made it through a week. Woot woot. So today's reading lesson, again, like some others, is I'm going to read a book on reading A to Z, which I will put copies of in your Raz Kids. Okay, so you can look at it too. So today, you are going to be reading about Jane Goodall. And I know some of you are going, Jane Goodall? So let me tell you our I can statement first. I can learn more by reading more than one text on a subject. So when you read a couple different things about the same topic, you can learn more. So when I turn this around, you're gonna see Smuggies laying on the table. Don't tell anybody my cats lay on the table. The dog sits in a chair and lays on the couch. Cats sleep on the table. So I'm gonna read a little bit about Jane Goodall just so you know who she is. And then we'll go from there. Jane Goodall. There she is as a young woman. Table of contents, The Watcher, Out of Africa, Into the Forest, Gobi Gang, Trouble in the Forest, Jane Goodall today. The Watcher. Jane Goodall was born in England. See, there she is. Jane Goodall was born in England in 1934. As a child, she liked to learn about animals. She liked to watch how they behaved. Jane learned how to read colorful stories about the jungle animals. She dreamed of living in Africa. Jane was sure that one day she would live with the animals and write stories about them. Off to Africa. When Jane finished school, she went to work in an office. She saved money she had earned. And when she saved enough, Jane took a trip to Kenya in Africa. In Kenya, she met Dr. Louis Leakey. Dr. Louis Leakey was a scientist who wanted to learn how apes might be like humans. Dr. Leakey hired Jane to work with him. One day, he talked about doing a new kind of study. The study would be about chimpanzees in Tanzania. Dr. Leakey was following the person was looking for a person to help him, but the person would be the one to watch and live with the chimps and write reports. He asked if Jane would like to study with him. So there's some little chimps. Off to the forest. Jane moved to the Gobi Desert, the forest in Tanzania. She watched the chimps every day. She wrote careful notes about what she saw. Jane saw how the chimps lived in family groups. Her notes, she gave each family member a name. So here is a map about where, here's Africa, and Tanzania is part of it. The Gobi Gang. At first, many of the chimps were afraid of Jane. The older chimps, named David, trusted Jane. One day, David let Jane meet his family group. She watched them and wrote reports about how they behaved. He wrote that her reports upset many beliefs. Some scientists doubted Goodall's findings. They didn't believe that the chimps had feelings and were very smart. They certainly didn't think that a serious scientist would give personal names to animals she studied. At that time, most people believed that the chimps ate only plants. Jane saw David's family eat meat. Most people believed that chimps weren't smart enough to use simple tools. James saw David use a stick to poke termites hill and reach the termite snack. That was smart. Jane reported that David used the stick as a tool to get her food. Her words upset many scientists because they only thought that only people would use tools. Other chimps also began to trust Jane and let her watch them. She reported chimp behavior that no one else had ever seen before. Jane said that each chimp behaved in its own way, just as humans do. She saw chimps being happy, sad, angry, loving, just like humans. Jane reported reports surprised many people. Her work made scientists think that their old ideas about the species might actually be wrong. Trouble in the forest. After living in Gombe for many years, Jane began to worry. Excuse me. She saw that many of the forests were being cut down. The chimps were losing their homes. Some people were hunting the chimps for food. Hunters were stealing baby chimps to sell them. Other older chimps were sold to labs for experiments. Here's a mother chimp protecting her baby chimp. Jane was afraid that the Gombe chimps might all die. She knew how to tell people what was happening in the she knew she had to tell people what was happening in the Gombe forest. Jane began to travel and talk with large groups of people. She asked them to help her save the chimps and the forest. People trusted Jane and listened to her. They agreed to support her work in the Gombe. Jane today. More than 50 years have passed since Jane Goodall first went to Tanzania. Today, she meets with people all over the world. She still talks about her work there. And when she can, she returns to her Gombe home. She walks into the forest and sits down quietly, and she smiles as she watches the chimps. So in 1977, Goodall set up the Jane Goodall Institute. Jane Goodall's Institute gives money to scientists who study chimps in the wild. It also teaches people living near wild places how to protect the wildlife in the area. In 1991, Goodall began the Roots and Shoots program. The Roots and Shoots program began in Tanzania with just 12 local teens. Today, it operates with more than 120 countries and has thousands of members. The main goal of Roots and Shoots is to educate young people about the problems that exist with them. To learn more about it, Roots and Shoots and janegoodall.org. And there's a glossary. So I'm just gonna flash to Hey Smuggies. So that's a little bit about Jane Goodall. And you are going to read about her time in the Gombe. Okay, there's a map that shows where it is. First one is called Furry Friends. The second article is called Talking to Animals. And the third article is called Chimpanzee Champions. So remember, yesterday we talked about after you do some reading, you can go back in the text to answer the questions that it asks. So I'm going to tell you, friends, you only have to do one of the sets of questions. Read all 3 articles because you're going to learn more about Jane Goodall in those articles. So happy reading, and I hope today's another beautiful day. We've made it through another week. Zooga zooga, it's a long weekend.